Okay, let's dive deep today. We're focusing on a really tough event, one that, well, it shook a lot of people. We're talking about the terrorist attack at the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue in Manchester, October 2nd, 2025. And crucially, this happened on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. It just makes the whole thing even more devastating.
Absolutely. And the immediate cost, the human cost, was just horrific. Two worshipers lost their lives. Adrian Dolby, who was 53, and Melvin Kravitz, 66. And three other people were seriously injured in the attack.
The attacker himself.
Identified as Jihad al-Shami. He was 35, a British citizen of Syrian descent. He was killed by police right there at the scene.
So our goal today, our mission, if you like, is to look beyond those immediate terrible headlines. We want to use the source material we have to really understand the context, the wider picture, especially this alarming rise in anti-Jewish hatred that led up to it. And also, the frameworks being developed both for security right now and for, well, longer-term prevention of this kind of hate.
Yeah, and what's really striking and frankly heartbreaking from the sources is that this attack, it wasn't actually a surprise to the community. There was this deep-seated fear, apparently for almost 2 years, that something like Manchester was, well, that it was coming. So this wasn't some bolt from the blue. It felt to them like a culmination.
Culmination, that's a heavy word. Let's start with the attack itself then. That terrible 6-minute window. Can you set the scene? Hire Crumpsall, the synagogue, around 9:30 in the morning.
That's right. 9:31 a.m., British summertime. The attack itself was terrifyingly fast and brutal. He started by driving his car, just straight into pedestrians outside the synagogue. Then he got out, dressed all in black apparently, and just started stabbing people.
And there was more, wasn't there? Something about an explosive device.
Yes. He was wearing what looked like one. Now, it was later confirmed it wasn't viable, wasn't actually functional. But, in that moment, that changes everything for the police response. It massively escalates the threat perception.
Which brings us to the police. Greater Manchester Police. Operation Plato, that's the Kenyan for a suspected terror attack, right?
Exactly. And their response time was, frankly, incredible. The attack starts 9:31 a.m. By 9:38 a.m., so just 6 minutes later, police had arrived and neutralized the attacker, shot him dead.
6 minutes? In an active attack, that's incredibly fast.
It really is. And it speaks volumes about the kind of security footing Jewish community sites are on these days. High alert is the norm. And we also have to mention the bravery inside the synagogue. Rabbi Daniel Walker. He acted so quickly, barricading doors, locking people inside, moving them away from the danger. That kind of quick thinking. It undoubtedly saved lives, no question.
So the immediate aftermath, what did that look like?
Intense. You had paramedics working on the injured bomb disposal units dealing with the attacker's car and the suspected device. Forensic teams everywhere. They did a controlled explosion on the car just to be safe. And later that day, it was formally declared a terrorist incident. Plus, 3 other people were arrested in connection with it.
And the investigation, what are they looking for? Motive?
Primarily, yes. And Islamist motive seems to be the focus, especially looking at his electronic devices, his online footprint. But there's another layer here, a really difficult one. The source material indicates that one of the victims, tragically, might have been shot by police officers by mistake during that chaotic confrontation.
Wait, hold on. That's huge. Even with that incredibly fast, successful response in neutralizing the threat to this potential for collateral damage.
It just shows the awful reality of what these frameworks call stage -6. Active violence. It's chaotic, it's fast, there are impossible decisions being made in split seconds. An attacker, a suspected bomb vest, Operation Plato prioritizes speed, stopping the killing. But even when it works incredibly well, like it did in terms of timing here, the risk of terrible mistakes, of tragedy, is still so high. It really underscores that hard security, while necessary, is reactive, and it's never going to be perfect.
That really sets up the next part of our conversation, doesn't it? If that hard security is the last resort, and it carries these risks, we have to look at the environment that made it necessary. This tsunami of hate, as community leaders are calling it.
Yes, Rafi Bloom, he's on the board of the Jewish Representative Council. He was very clear. He called the Manchester attack the culmination of this rising tide of anti-Jewish hate, especially since October 7th, 2023. He stressed this isn't just about one lone wolf, It's about a whole atmosphere becoming hostile.
And what specific things were people experiencing? What did this tsunami look like on the ground?
Well, the sources mentioned things like students being attacked physically on university campuses, a lot more online abuse, but physical abuse too, just becoming more common. Even reports of mistreatment within the NHS, which is Shocking. And then these regular protests described by the community as hate marches.
Are there numbers to back this up? Statistics.
Oh, yes. The Community Security Trust, the CST, tracks this stuff meticulously. Their figures are quite stark. Before October 2023, they were recording about 161 anti-Semitic incidents a month, on average. In the first half of 2025, that jumped to 254 a month.
Wow.
That's a 58% increase. And the annual totals are record-breaking. Over 4,000 incidents in 2023, over 3,500 in 2024.
Those numbers paint a grim picture. It sounds exactly like what the frameworks describe as stage Nick 4, societal dissent.
Right. When you see that level of reported hatred, it suggests that polarization, anger, blaming minorities, it's becoming more mainstream, more normalized.
Precisely. And Rafi Bloom pointed fingers, suggesting that government leadership hadn't done enough, that they'd sort of allowed this atmosphere to develop. He specifically talked about city centers becoming, in his words, no-go areas for Jewish people during some pro-Palestine marches, particularly when signs appear comparing Jews to Nazis. That's a really dangerous sign of societal decay.
And the politics around this flared up immediately after the attack, too, didn't it? Right. It did. The Home Secretary, Shaban Mahmoud, strongly criticized groups planning pro-Palestine marches just hours later, called it un-British, dishonorable, and urged them to cancel. It really highlighted that tension between protest rights and community safety and respect, especially in such raw circumstances.
But beyond the politics, there's a security reality here that seems almost separate.
Absolutely. I mean, the source material makes a really sobering point. Jewish places, synagogues, schools, community centers, they need round-the-clock protection. Heavy security. Just think about that. Is that sustainable? For a whole community to live essentially under siege, needing constant professional security, it shows the depth of the threat they feel, regardless of any official national threat level.
That feels like the core issue we need to explore now. If constant heavy security is the main defense, then something more fundamental, more structural, isn't working. But before we get fully into prevention, you mentioned something about a local effort in Manchester, a glimmer of hope.
Yes, it's important to note, just 2 months before this horrific attack, the local Jewish Representative Council and the Muslim community in Manchester actually signed a declaration together, committing to dialogue, to talking to each other civilly and respectfully, even amid disagreements. It's a small thing, perhaps, but in this context, it feels like a really significant act of local resistance against that very polarization.
That commitment to dialogue, it's the complete opposite of the hate we saw manifest in the attack. Okay, so let's shift focus. From the immediate response, we saw the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, chairing CoBR, pledging more police resources nationwide. That's the necessary stage-night civil reaction, dealing with the violence. But how do we address that stage-nitis 4, that societal dissent, the tsunami of hate?
And this is exactly where Dr. Magadz's 6 stages framework, the SSF, is so useful. It helps us make that crucial distinction. We need to separate intervening right at the point of violence. Stage-nitis 6, which is the attack itself, the extremists, the hate leaders, from addressing the societal roots. Stage-nitis 6 response is Operation Plato. It's arrests, it's identifying high-risk people, hard security.
But the bigger challenge, the one Rafi Bloom was talking about, is stopping stage mid 4, that environment of anger, blaming, polarization. Why is distinguishing between med 4 and med 6 so important?
Because if you only fight stage med 6, you're just constantly reacting to the symptoms. You're not curing the disease. The SSF framework really puts the onus on political leadership and society as a whole to manage that stage med 4 environment. If certain areas are becoming no-go zones for a minority group, that's a massive stage metaphor failure signal. You have to step in then. Otherwise, you're just waiting for the next extremist to emerge from that toxic climate. It becomes a cycle.
Okay, so this requires a real shift in thinking, doesn't it? The long-term answer isn't just faster police response, it's changing the conditions on the ground. I was struck by Dr. Magadza comparing biases to viruses, undetected until symptoms show, treating them when the tree is young, and framing empathy and equity as, quote, survival skills, not just nice ideas.
Exactly. It reframes the whole problem. It's not just about crime. It's about a kind of public health issue, a systemic infection of bias. And that leads us directly to things like anti-bias education, or ABE, which is a structured way, often used in schools, K-12, to build resilience against this virus right from the start, using the IDJA framework.
IDJA. Okay, let's break that down. What do those letters stand for? Because it sounds like a roadmap.
It really is. So ID is for identity, helping kids develop a positive sense of who they are, their own background, their own social identity, respecting themselves. D is for diversity, encouraging comfort with difference, not just tolerance, but like respectful curiosity, Empathy for people who aren't like you. J is for justice. This is about learning to recognize unfairness, both individual stuff like bullying, but also bigger systemic unfairness, patterns of bias. And A is for action, empowering kids and adults too to actually do something, to stand up or speak out when they see injustice or exclusion happening.
That sounds incredibly powerful. But that justice piece, how tricky is that to navigate, especially in schools, after something like Manchester, talking about systemic unfairness? Doesn't that risk becoming highly politicized?
That's a really fair question, and it's a challenge. But the way the framework is designed helps. You build the foundations first. Identity and diversity come before justice and action. You're establishing self-worth and mutual respect first. Then, when you get to justice, the goal isn't to push a specific political view. It's about teaching kids how to analyze fairness, how to look critically at situations, at systems, using evidence, not just emotion. It's about developing analytical skills rather than dictating conclusions.
Makes sense. And crucially, this kind of education connects directly to preventing radicalization, right?
Yeah.
By building critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It equips people to resist manipulation, especially online. A big part of this is media literacy. Using current events, yes, even painful ones, as teachable moments. Discussing media bias. Asking, where does this information come from? Who benefits? Teaching things like lateral reading, that skill of checking multiple sources quickly to verify something instead of just falling down one rabbit hole.
And the sources make a strong point. Don't avoid the difficult topics. Shying away from politically charged issues is a lost opportunity. We need to teach people how to talk about things they disagree on, maybe passionately disagree on, without resorting to hatred or dehumanization. That feels vital right now.
It really does. And that need for intervention for systems also leads into the more formal counter-radicalization work, like the UK's PREVENT strategy. These frameworks are less about universal education and more about identifying specific risks. They use indicators, things people say or do, and categorize them. Suggestive signs, red flags, high risk. The idea is to spot vulnerability early on, to offer support or intervention before someone reaches that stage 96 violence.
And the internet looms large here again, doesn't it? Consistently flagged as the major issue.
Overwhelmingly so. It's called the greatest threat for radicalization. It just removes all barriers, geography, time. It accelerates everything, which is why you see this strong call in the sources for a zero-tolerance approach to online extremism, putting real pressure on social media companies. They need to take responsibility for the hate festering on their platforms, and crucially, be transparent about it. Publish data on what they're taking down. Accountability is key.
But there's a tension here, too. PREVENT in the UK has faced criticism, being called toxic, seen as surveillance by some communities.
Yes, that's a significant hurdle. Even if a framework is well-intentioned, if it loses community trust, its effectiveness plummets.
Yeah.
People won't engage, won't refer concerns. It becomes counterproductive. And this leads to Dr. Magatz's really sharp warning about these official strategies. She cautions leaders against letting their own biases shape how they define extremism, using it just to target people they disagree with. Because if you do that, she warns, you risk becoming the very thing you're fighting. Using security tools to shut down legitimate dissent.
That's a profound challenge. So, pulling all this together, what's the big picture takeaway from this deep dive? It seems we're facing this dual reality. We absolutely need that immediate, hard security response. Manchester showed its necessity and effectiveness, despite the risks. But at the same time, that's not enough. We desperately need the long-term structural work, building empathy, critical thinking, resilient communities.
Exactly. And frameworks like ABE with that IDJA model, identity, diversity, justice, action, they offer a concrete path. It's not just for governments or schools. It gives us, as individuals, tools to tackle the biases that fuel the polarization, that create the staged Nidus-4 environment where violence can grow. And remember that glimmer of hope in Manchester, that local Jewish-Muslim dialogue initiative. That points towards the power of proactively countering hate.
So we leave you with this thought. Knowledge is power, right? How can you, listening now, use these ideas we've discussed, the SSF stages, distinguishing societal hate from active violence, the IDJA model for building resilience? How can you use them to spot bias? In yourself, maybe. In the media you consume, in what leaders say. And critically, how do we heed that warning? How do we ensure our fight against extremism doesn't become a weapon against dissent, creating more division, more mistrust? That feels like the real work, the structural work, that has to continue long after the immediate crisis passes.